What's going on, everybody? My name is John Poznansky. Welcome to episode 15 of Destination Talk.
And I am Harry, and we are coming to you from Chop Studios located at 750 Route 34 in Matawan, New Jersey. And we are sponsored by the Academy Sports Performance. Is your athlete ready to take their game to the next level? Check out the Academy Sports Performance in Garwood, New Jersey. Located at 100 North Avenue, the Academy provides expert sports performance training specifically designed for athletes. To sign up for your free trial class, go to their website at www.academysportsnj.com. Check out their Instagram page, Academy Sports NJ, or you can get them on their tech support line at 908-540-6936. Today, I am thrilled for this episode. We are joined by Josef Manuel, a gentleman with over 20 years of experience as a martial artist. He is the owner of Cutting Edge Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy in Harrison, New Jersey, a place that both John and I have seen. It's a beautiful place. If you're in that area, you need to go see him. 2009 black belt IBJJF no gi world champion master. 2010 black belt IBJJF. Can we have less letters in this thing, please? European Open champion master. Fourth degree black belt. There are just too many accomplishments for me to even just get into, so I'm going to stop there. We'll let Josef tell us a little bit more about himself. But I have to take a moment here, gentlemen. I really do, because this, like I said, this is a very special episode for me. Speed Coach Harry does not exist without this man here in the middle. He created my logo. He created the Instagram account that I did not want to have. And it's because of that Instagram account and a video I posted of this guy across from me that I was training at the time, that I probably am why I'm sitting here at a table doing a podcast interviewing him. So Josef, I want you to understand just how much that meant to me. And I still have my shirts and shorts. I still wear them. I still wear them. So welcome to Destination Talk. Thank you for coming in. How you doing?
Pleasure. I'm doing great. Thank you very much.
So what else can you add to what I included in the introduction? Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Oh, man. I mean, we just been in the game for a long time, right? You know, I started, training back in 2001. And a lot of fervor, a lot of passion. And we just... constantly testing ourselves out there. Teaching is awesome. I love teaching adults, kids, but that competition, man, that's the one thing that lights that fire inside of me. It keeps you on your toes. And so we're still out there competing in Master 4.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be like that. I always joke around and tell my kids, I'm like, man, they're going to be like, man, whose old man is this? Get this guy. Man, Instagram ain't even around no more. Why you still posting highlights videos on Instagram? Somebody get this old man, I want to be that old guy still out there alive and moving fast and really showing people, beautiful jiu-jitsu,
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about what your inspiration was and how you got involved in jiu-jitsu coming up?
So I've always been, obviously, as a young man watching the Shaw Brothers films on Saturday and Sunday, the wushu flicks, kung fu flicks, that was like an inspiration to me. In particular, Gordon Liu. I wasn't really into Bruce Lee. I think I was too young for that, or I just wasn't really into him.
Right.
But I did get a chance to watch Gordon Liu, and I started watching like these movies, and now, we go out into the street and start hi-ying and kicking and punching each other. That was originally how I got interested in the martial arts. Then, I say unfortunately, sometimes in life it's like that, where you see things that are bad, but then when you're older and you look back, it turns out it was actually something good, right? So unfortunately, every kid goes through bullying and things like that, and we went through that too. And there was like a real passion inside of me. That was something that really bothered me as a young man. I didn't really like that feeling of being helpless, not being able to defend myself. So that was another reason, another drive behind why I wanted to train martial arts. Unfortunately, we were too poor. My father couldn't afford, martial arts training. And then finally, when I was old enough, I had the resources, the financial resources to invest in training. I did it. I started training jiu-jitsu in particular after watching Royce Gracie and the UFC when he submitted Dan Severn with that triangle. Absolutely amazing. Nobody knew what the hell that was. Everyone was like, what's going on over here, And then I pulled the trigger to start training in around 2000, 2001 because I was a little out of shape. You know?
Right.
I worked as a cosmetologist and as a musician, percussionist. And I would spend a lot of hours sitting down practicing my rudiments and things like that. And from eating and just playing, I gained some weight. I was uncomfortable with myself, you know? And I was like, man, I need to get in shape. And they just happened to open a Jiu-Jitsu Academy literally like a few stores away from the barbershop that I used to work in. And so once I stepped in there, that was it. That's all she wrote. I never looked back.
And you had a pretty well-known role model in the sport, did you not?
Well, we all do,
Right.
right? Like if you talk to anybody in the jiu-jitsu world, at least from the generation that I come from, Rickson Gracie was the role model. He was like considered the greatest jiu-jitsuka ever, right? I was fortunate to be able to train with a gentleman that trained directly under the Gracie lineage, which was Marcio Lemos.
Right.
And he actually was the competition team captain for the brown belts on the Rickson Gracie competition team.
That's impressive.
He was my first instructor.
Someone who's considering jiu-jitsu for the first time, what would you tell them? What are some of the benefits of you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what would you say to someone who's saying, hey, I have a kid or an adult, I'm thinking about it, what would you say to them?
There's so many benefits. I don't want to go get too dark with it, but there's some things that, as of right now, we have an epidemic with loneliness.
Right.
And especially with men, right? Their lack of communication, on the dating scene, it's like, women are like, the women go out and there's a lot of women, there's no men at the parties, right? And I think that that's one of the benefits for men is to be able to rebuild the confidence to deal with people personally on a one-on-one, speaking to them, community, right? That's one of the great benefits for men nowadays, especially after COVID. Everyone was locked up,
right.
and a lot of people went through some serious mental health issues and stuff like that. That's what I'm dealing with as an owner, as a school owner. When I'm dealing with a lot of men, they're just down, man. They're down. They're locked up home, playing video games or just alone. And getting into the academy, apart from the health benefits, getting in shape, toning up, toning down, there's that sense of community, of
right.
brotherhood. People who don't talk are starting to talk now, come out. And I think that's a really, really important thing for the men. As far as children are concerned, it's not a mystery that, the bullying epidemic is, there are kids out there committing suicide,
right?
Because they don't have the tools or the resources to be able to deal with online bullying or verbal bullying or bullying in person. I saw recently this report of a young girl who was bullied. Young girl didn't know how to deal with it, and she committed suicide. So. That's like I said, I don't want to go too dark, but
right.
those are like those serious things that I can't help look at those things as a father, as a professor.
Right.
Obviously, there are other things that benefit, but when you look at society, I think some of the things that jiu-jitsu training, that community in jiu-jitsu can really tackle head on, and you can see some amazing results where you see men turn around, become more social, more confident, the ability to speak to people in person as opposed to online all the time,
I know just following you. And your platform, I know you're very big on that. You're always, like, I think you're in your car, always speaking. And I can say truthfully, Josef is always saying, my phone is always on. You can always reach out to me. You can always call me. You can always text me. And that is something that at least for the few, we've known each other now for almost 4 years, I think now. You've been that from day one.
Now, let me tell you where that comes from. Because usually when I post something like that, it's because I just had a phone call with somebody that was going through it.
Right. Now, you used to share that with me.
And then it's like, I feel like that. I'm like, man, what can I do, man? I just got off the phone with this person. They're really going through it. They're down. They lost this. They lost that. They're looking for advice, some type of guidance. And then I get off, and that's why I post those videos. Like, man, if you're going through it,
reach out.
Just reach out, man.
Reach out. No, you do very good with that.
It's always good to have someone to talk to, because saying something is definitely helps for sure.
It's helpful for sure.
Can you walk us a little bit through your training regimen and how your training looks like right now as a competitor?
At the moment, because of certain injuries, right, I had to kind of restructure my training. But typically, like anybody else, right, I think us athletes, we're constantly like overdoing it, right? Because in our mind, tell me if I'm wrong, right? You think in your mind, this guy might be working harder than I am, right?
Yeah.
So because of that, because we think that, we're constantly pushing to do extra. Well, I'm a little older now. I'm hopefully a little wiser. I'm learning to just like cut back a little bit and give myself time to recover. And try to remove that thought from my mind that, oh, this guy's outworking me. He's not outworking me, just because we're going to get better if we can rest and recover.
Yeah, you gotta be smart when you train and recover.
That's the smart part of training that they don't teach you. You got to go through that through experience, you know?
Or it's that no pain, no gain mentality.
Yeah.
And if you sit out a play, people will say you're soft or you're not tough enough. And in reality, rest and recovery are probably more important now than they ever were before.
Yes. So that's where I am right now, where I am pacing myself, allowing myself plenty of time to recover, as opposed to physically training, doing more of like mental training, studying video, or maybe studying some of what my opponents are doing, people that I might possibly face, and doing more analytical training where I'm keeping my mind busy, but I'm not putting so much wear and tear on my body.
Your body,
you know? That's where we are right now. And this, the training is very consistent. That's another thing. I'm preaching to the choir here. We have to be very consistent with the time, right? So my times, because obviously I have to cater to a lot of people, being a school owner, are the Tuesday and Thursday morning sessions, right? Those are sessions that run from 8:30 to midday. And then that's all divided into certain portions of the class where we do our wrestling, we do our judo. There's groundwork on the bottom, defense, offense. And, I create my planners where they're all specifically designed so that we can get that acquire skill acquisition.
Yeah, organization and plan.
Organization and planning, and try to get that the results that we need, quickly.
Yeah,
as quickly as possible.
I think building off of that, then I would say, how do you balance being a competitor, a business owner, and a family man?
Man, we are like, burning the candle at both ends, right? But, it's a very strict schedule.
Because you're very hands-on in the teaching.
Yes. Very strict schedule, man. I don't snooze my alarm. It's right up and it's time to go. I try to set things up the night before, so this way everything's prepared the next day, and that's just being very strict with my time,
Disciplined.
Yeah, very disciplined.
Can you talk a little bit about your facility and your training, everything at your facility?
So there's been an update at the opening. You mentioned Cutting Edge Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but we have completely remodeled the school and changed the name. It is now the Choke Lab Jiu-Jitsu Academy.
Well, my apologies.
No worries.
My apologies.
I didn't tell you.
Your bio still said that Cutting Edge, but that's okay.
We gotta check what bio you got that from.
I'll have to look.
I think I updated the website too, but it's in the works. So there's still some information out there
that's exciting.
Hasn't been updated.
That's exciting.
It is really exciting.
I know, and still in Harrison.
Yeah, still in Harrison, and so we're open 7 days a week, and we cater to ages from 3 and up. And it's a variety of classes, mainly gi classes. I try to implement more no gi classes, to be honest with you, because I like no gi. But my students are like, they're really hardcore gi people,
And is that the more traditional side of the sport?
Yes.
Okay.
Training in the gi is the
I
more
feel like a lot of
traditional
people are like nowadays, from what I see, a lot of people do the no gi more than the gi. At least from
not at my academy.
Not at your academy.
No, man. I tried to implement more days. They kind of boycotted me. I had an extra day, and what happened was nobody showed up. So I had to put it back to gi, and then they showed up.
That's also because he makes some fabulous gis for his competitors and for his members. This man has many talents, and some of his gis are amazing. You gotta check them out.
Definitely will.
How have you seen the sport of jiu-jitsu evolve over the years?
It's like a pendulum. It swings back and forth. But the one thing that I have noticed over the last I would say 5 to 8 years is that because of the advancement of sports science, everyone's getting stronger, everybody's getting faster. You see less of the technical part, right? So when I started training, you're talking about back in the day when Hoyler was still competing, Hickson was still doing MMA in Japan, and the emphasis was always like technique conquers all,
right.
And then, but back then, there were very few athletes that, I could name a few. For example, Fernando Margarida, he was a guy that really took that physical conditioning aspect to training as an athlete to the next level, where you could actually see the results in his and his matches, you know. And so then that started kind of blowing up, and it grew. And then, you know, like I said, you can see like there's been a decline in terms of the technical aspect of jiu-jitsu, you know. People, you still see submissions, you still see some stuff, but it's more because they use a lot of speed and a lot of power, you know. And then so what happens is that creates what I call purple cows. So when you look out there, you'll see for example, like a Tainan Dalpra, who he's an absolute standout. But it's because he really focuses on the details of the techniques. You know, even though he's fast and he's strong, he didn't let himself get carried away into that aspect of jiu-jitsu. Where I'm not a huge fan of the person I'm going to mention, but he does make a point. I'm just not a huge fan of like his character, the way he portrays himself as a professional athlete. I think it's a little irresponsible. You got a bunch of young kids, influential youth following you. You know, when you have that kind of power, you're a world champion. You don't have to, but it would behoove you to try to act a little more responsible and lead those people in the right way. But Gordon Ryan says, he uses the term spazzy. You know, like a bunch of spazzy white belts. What he's basically saying is that when he looks at jiu-jitsu, he's looking at it from a technical perspective. And since people are so strong and fast, they're jumping here, jumping there, jumping there, creating scrambles that are totally unnecessary. And that's one thing I can't say about him. When you watch his matches, he doesn't let anyone carry him into any crazy scrambles. He's very methodical. He's very precise. And he always looks for the submission, you know? So
as a competitor, when you're going up against an individual who's competing like that, how do you, without giving away any of your secrets, of course, but look, how do you combat that?
I mean, it's similar to like wrestling, right? Anybody could do a single, double leg. Can you hold them down?
That's the hardest part, yeah.
That's the hardest part right there.
Yeah.
So we have to focus on that same principle, but it's going to be applied a little different in jiu-jitsu because we're not restricted to staying down.
You can lock your hands. Wrestling can't.
We can fight off our back, right?
Yep.
So it's a little more intricate in terms of how do you keep somebody down. But there are those control points.
Right.
And so personally, I try to study that. You know, I try to study what control points I need to be focused on so this way I can stop that person from jumping around and moving around and relegate him to the game that I want to play.
I've always respected your attention to detail. And you know, when I watched your videos, even though I have no clue what I'm watching,
we're gonna get you on jiu-jitsu next.
Yeah, I guess it took me 5 years to figure out wrestling, but you know, I've gotten there, so I guess I need a new challenge. But the one thing I can tell just from common sense is that you are very technical and attentive to the detail, and I think that's one of the reasons why you've had so much success on the mat.
Yeah, that's the way we were raised, like from the beginning. When I trained with Mario, you know, he was always talking about technique. You know, Hoyler. You go back and look at any video of Hickson Gracie and Hoyler. Those back in the day, that was everything they always talked about. You know, there was a change. You know, for a while from Elio's camp, which was, you know, he's known as the founder of, you know, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. You know, he focused a lot on the technical aspect. But then you had another family member, Carlson Gracie, who was more focused on the athletic aspect, you know? And so, you know, we're trying to keep a balance between the two. I tell my athletes all the time, you should look at jiu-jitsu in terms of preparation like a triangle. You have the top of the triangle and you have the base. At the top, it should be technique. And then on the bottom, you have speed and strength, right? So at technique, there's a few prongs there, right? There's the visualization aspect of training, right? Watching, studying matches. There's the psychological aspect, reading your books. You know, one of my favorite books to always recommend is The Mindset of a Champion by Jim Aframo. And then there's the actual technical preparation, you know, class, judo, wrestling, top game, bottom game, spider guard, whatever that is. And then you have the creme de la creme or the filet mignon of the technical aspect, which is your private lessons, right? And then you have your speed training and you have your strength training. And so we must never let the triangle flip on the other side where strength is at the top and technique is on the bottom. You know, we got to always keep the technique at the top. So that's how I train, and that's how I teach my students to train. And you can see the results. You know?
I like that triangle diagram.
Yes, I've heard this before. I have heard this before for sure.
Well, I was going to say, what do you feel that separates you than others within the sport of jiu-jitsu? What separates you? So there's nothing wrong with this. I don't want to make it sound like it's a bad thing, but you know, jiu-jitsu is
there are a lot of aspects to it. But then you have some people who become specialists. So when I'm training, I train judo, I train wrestling, I train on the bottom. And you're talking about, as far as guards are concerned, you're talking about deep half guard, Z guard, butterfly guard, single leg X, modified single leg X, traditional X guard, De La Riva.
There's a million of them.
There's a million guards.
You can Google all of these if you need to.
So
I know what he's talking about. Don't worry.
So, we're not specialists. There's some places where they only focus on half guard.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the difference between me, my approach to jiu-jitsu, how I compete, how I perform, and how I train and prepare my athletes, not to be specialists, right? Because that's what makes, there's this, they say online, I'm sure you've heard it, they'll be like, oh, jiu-jitsu is not an exciting sport to watch. That's a lie. It's extremely exciting to watch. It's those guys who make it not exciting to watch, that they just kind of like butt flop and they'll go to one position and then stay there for the whole duration of the match and then try to score 2 points at the end.
Yeah.
You'll never see a match like that of mine. It's non-stop action from beginning to the end.
Yeah,
if you're standing, I'm going to put you down. If you go down, I'm going to pass your guard. If I happen to be on the bottom, which is very rare, because I don't get swept, but if I happen to be on the bottom, you're going to see some dynamic guard play. Spider guard, De La Riva, tarantula, sweeps, overhead sweeps. I love Yoko Tomonaye, Very exciting. So that's the difference between me and most of the guys that I deal with in competition.
You've touched on this. I want to just expand on it a little bit more. You and I, through the years, have had many a deep conversations. So just the mental side of it, the mindset. How do you get yourself to that place?
Wow, that's a deep one. I mean, everything that is physical was once metaphysical. So there's another element to everything that we know of in this world.
Right.
That most people, for whatever reason, they ignore that part, right? I try to stay in tune with a little bit of the spiritual part of life, right? For me, I'm Christian, right? Yep. So, our prime example is Jesus Christ. And so there's many things that he taught us, but the one thing that he teaches us that I think is important for us to follow is when he says, I can do nothing of myself. And you're talking about somebody who created miracles and stuff like that. And he said, I can do nothing on myself, which speaks of the ultimate sense or state of mind of humility. So that's where I try to start. I'm grateful for everything. I'm grateful for my house, my car, my wife, my children. I wake up in the morning, I'm like, thank you. I try to stay right there. And that's where I get my ground. That's the foundation to how I can do the things that I do. Because like I said, we were talking earlier about people who I speak to, because they look to me and they're like, man, how you do it, Joe? And they're looking to someone who seems like they have a solid, solid character or
solid
aura.
base.
Solid base, right? So when they come to me, sometimes they don't know that, but I tell them. And that's where it's coming from. That's the foundation right there. And we built everything off of that.
Yeah. People see stuff just from what they say, but they don't know actually what it is behind closed doors or how you got there.
Exactly.
And that's kind of the reason of this podcast, how we get to our destination, what our journey looked like.
Yes.
So another key, point is nutrition. How can you talk a little about how the importance of nutrition was in your training regimen? And
I'm thankful to the journey of jiu-jitsu because that was something that I really wasn't into that stuff, right? Like, unfortunately, my dad, may he rest in peace. He made, when he made food, it wasn't based on the nutritional value. It was based off of how did it taste, right? And so, once you get a taste of sugar, man, I don't care who you are, it's addictive.
Yeah.
You want it more and more. So if you taste a pepper or an onion or a garlic, kids don't want to taste that,
yeah,
right?
it's not good.
You have to be raised like that in a home where they kind of instill this in you from youth to eat that. So jiu-jitsu was what brought me more to like a lifestyle of eating, healthy,
Yeah.
And it's been a journey, but I can say now that that's one of the things that I really cut out of my nutrition was like eating a lot of sugary foods and stuff. It wasn't easy. It took time. But with consistency and dedication, now I can sit down. And years ago, I look at a raw onion and be like, nah. But now I can eat a raw onion, raw garlic, pepper. And it's actually amazing. I've seen the results physically and mentally. It really makes a difference how you eat.
Well, and I know, too, like when we were training, you were kind of in that process.
Yes.
Because there were sometimes Joseph would show up to the sessions and like I could tell it was a bad nutritional day. He was really struggling. Because also too, if I'm not mistaken, you were in between. You weren't sure what weight class you were going to compete at, and you were trying to get down to the lower weight, but you know you were kind of in that in between at those times, and so some of those sessions were a challenge for us, because not being well fed can affect you.
I know that guys
you
too.
know. I've never had that problem,
Yeah.
but you know,
When I started training with Coach, that was 2001.
Right.
I had stopped competing for about 8 or 9 years.
well, no, 21.
21.
21. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
don't make us
I said-
that much older.
I'm so sorry.
We're not that old yet.
21.
I wasn't born yet.
Yeah. I wasn't even doing this job yet.
Yeah, 21. I'm sorry. Yeah, I had taken some time off due to like my wife and I had with 2 beautiful baby girls, and I wanted to make sure that I was there for her to help with the kids grow up. I don't want to be competing and traveling and stuff like that. And then so I had to figure out where I was going to be. And before I stopped competing, I was competing in light featherweight and in the roosterweight division. But then after 9 years of not cutting weight, when we came back, I was having a struggle. I was trying to figure out how we can maintain the weight and if I was going to stay there or not. And then ultimately, I decided to just not put so much strain on my body. It's not like when I was younger, we were trying to... When I was competing in the adult division, we placed for bronze in 2011. That was like me giving it all that I had. To compete on the adult division on the podium of the IBJJF World Championship was like the hardest thing I ever did in my life. But after that, when I was competing in master division, I'm like, why am I putting myself through all this? I'm not competing for the adult division world gold medal, right? And that's when I decided, you know what? I pushed in. I won some awesome titles in light feather. But then I said, you know what? This is one thing I noticed. One day, there was no one in my category in the light featherweight. So there was the featherweight and master 4. So I was like, you know what? I don't have to cut. Let me jump into this category, right? There was no one to compete against. I think it was Indianapolis in 2022. So I jump in. There were 4 guys there. I was just looking for action, bro. Right? Now, what I noticed was when I jumped into this bracket and these guys came in, they were cutting from light to feather. And you could smell the coffee on their breath, which means they didn't have breakfast. They were just trying to drink a little bit of coffee to get a pep to jump into the match. So now here I am, natural light feather, right? Now I just signed up for feather. I'm feeling fine. I didn't have to cut weight. I was healthy. I had breakfast. Man, I ran through all these guys and I realized, wait a minute, I have an advantage here. I'm gonna stay right here. So I'm not a featherweight. I'm a light featherweight, but I compete in the featherweight division because I'm comfortable.
Yeah, because weigh-ins are right in the beginning.
Yes,
right
you got to
as
weigh
step
in
on.
and then step on the scale and then jump right into the category. So these guys are having a bad morning, and then here I'm, like jumping around and all fast, and it's awesome, bro. It's awesome. It's been really working to my advantage.
I've watched you compete, not in person, but on the screen, and you definitely are moving quickly on the mat, and those guys don't know what happens to them when they're doing that.
It's so funny.
Prior to coming on, we were talking, we were catching up, but you've had to deal with injuries and setbacks along the way. So what continues to motivate you every day to keep moving forward?
My students. Yeah, the students. I would say that's the top. Right? There are a few things, but obviously my students, to look at them, the look in their eyes when they see that pride of like, man, that's my professor, They see me out there competing, not all the time we get to, but there's some events where the whole school will go, and to hear that roar behind you, and they're, Cobra, no para. Man, it's crazy, man, But then, personally speaking, like, I want to be able to push as much as I can and push it to the limit. And make sure that my legacy, as long as I can, I'm going to be out there competing. It's tough with injuries. It's the life of an athlete. There's no way around it. But as long as my body can hold up, and I can be out there competing, I'm going to be out there pushing it.
Do you want to just quickly explain the nickname? Because I know in the beginning you did not like that name. So how did you come to get it, and how did you come to embrace it?
So I started training late, right? Like I started training around 27 years old, and but I had a lot of life experience, and so I stepped onto the mat, with a lot of what I would say. I was a little streetwise, right? So when I would train with Professor Mario, I'm very observative. I would pay attention to what he was doing, and I would document everything. I'd go home and write notes about how the training session was with him. So as I was writing these things down, then obviously I was using the techniques that he was doing on me, on my teammates. And so, one day he said, in his broken English, he said, "Man, you're snaky," which really meant, like, he meant to say, "You're sneaky," right? I would escape out of positions, I could feel what he was doing. And he said, "Man, you're snaky. You're very snaky." And I go, "You mean sneaky?" He goes, yeah, snaky. And then he say, in Portuguese, he said, "Você é igual uma cobra. You're like a snake. You're like a cobra." And then he started calling me Zé Cobra. I didn't like it.
Yeah, no,
because, when you hear snake, it's never associated with anything good,
Yeah.
Man, no matter how hard I tried, it was the
You learned
the
to
Streisand effect.
You learned to embrace it.
Yeah.
The Streisand effect. Like, the more you try to stop it,
It just keeps coming.
It just keeps coming, man, and it's stuck.
And that's how they find you on Instagram too, if I'm not mistaken.
I had to accept it, man. That was it.
So with the knowledge you have now, if you had the opportunity to go back and speak to your younger self, what would you say?
I would say eat better, rest more. Right? As far as competition and training is concerned, that's what I would tell myself. But I think, thankfully to Professor Mario Lemos, when I started training with him, he instilled in me a lot of great disciplines, I think one of the things that he would always instill in us is, like, to be diligent in our studies, So to this day, I'm very diligent with my private lessons. I like to do seminars, go to seminars and learn. If I can go to a camp, always very diligent with my studies, and consistent in training. He would always talk about that. So those are things that I listen to him, and I've carried those, over the last 25 years, So I don't really have a problem with those things, And but if I could go back, I'd tell myself to rest more, and definitely eat better.
We've probably touched on quite a few of these topics that are going to be involved in the answer to this question. But what advice would you offer to those who are listening to the podcast from an athletic perspective, to what they should be doing, considering, preparing themselves? Like, we have a lot of, high school athletes, maybe we're getting ready for college and such like that. In the
jiu-jitsu world, I think one of the things that I would like to express here that the youth should be, advice that I can give them is that right now, sports science and information science is constantly evolving, right? We think we know it all right now, and then in 5 years, something else will pop up and we'll be like, wow, I didn't know that.
Maybe even 5 minutes from now.
Yeah, 5 minutes now. It's even faster, right? And so, right now in the jiu-jitsu world, there's this, like, debate. There's, like, an issue right now over some of the traditional methods that are used in training for skill acquisition. And there's, like, this new method that they're calling the ecological approach, a constraints-led method of training. And there's a big divide and debate about it, right? And what I would say is, if you're young, a jiu-jitsu practitioner, obviously, because the young, when I say young, I don't mean young in terms of age, I mean young in rank, right? They just started. These students or these hobbyists or practitioners are highly influenced by the information on the internet, on social media. And so what I would advise is, like, there is no secret to this. There is no one method that you're going to do that's going to, there are these promises of getting good faster and get a black belt in 3 years. There is no, that doesn't exist, right? I mean, there is a method, but it's not one particular method. It's consistency in training. It's private lessons. It's doing research. It's coming to class, open match, training with your professor, going to camps, seminars. It's all of those things are the ingredients, right? If I said to you, right, let's make a lasagna. And I said, we're only going to use cheese. How do you think the lasagna is going to come out? Not really well, because
I'd still be hungry.
You still be hungry. Right? We need all the other ingredients. We need the pasta. We need the sauce. We need oregano, right? We need the olive oil. We need all these ingredients to make that lasagna, taste good and come out good.
Talk about eating healthy. He chooses lasagna to discuss on the show.
It's a good thing. But you saying that goes back to your triangle diagram you were talking about earlier. That I kind of recognize that, what you were saying just from now.
Yeah. So that's the thing that I would say to the young people coming up now. Like, be careful with that stuff. Right? There's a lot of gimmicks online. A lot of people trying to sell this magic potion, magic trick. Man, listen, everything works. Should you lift? Yeah, you should lift. Should you do speed training? Absolutely. Should you drill? They use the word drill. It's a common word in the martial arts world.
Yep.
But it really should be, the phrase that we should use, I use in the academy, is form repetition. You're working on your form and you're doing repetition to refine it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I could do a single leg, I could do it all crazy. But if
Yeah.
I work on my form, make sure my head position is right, big head in the chest, right? Hands clasped together, posture. So we want to work on our form and repetition. Should you do that? Absolutely. Are there days where you could go in and not do any form repetition and just go live? Absolutely. Should you do live from specific positions? Absolutely. Should you go live from general, just slap, bump, and then all of it works. There's no one magic potion that's going to help you acquire skill. That's what I would say.
Well, Joseph, this was. I'm glad we were able to get you on. This was a
Thanks for the
special.
invite,
This was
man.
a special episode for me because
I was just more happy to see you,
Yeah,
George.
likewise too, man. I likewise too, man. It was.
Of
really,
course, I want to see the champ,
Yeah,
too.
I hear you, man.
No, this was great. No, thanks for coming on.
I mean, it's just both of you have played a very important role into where I am today, and I've said this to Dana many times when we've talked. I think if not for meeting you, obviously I knew this guy a little bit slightly before you, but if not for meeting you, I don't believe I'm as successful today as I am.
Awesome.
And for that, I thank you.
Man, my pleasure.
Because it's been, and I'll never forget our training sessions, our conversations. Speed Coach Harry is all your brainstorm. He came in with a couple of logos and the name, and he's like, "Which one do you like?" And I chose that.
I was like, Coach, what are we doing?
Yeah.
We gotta
do
get on
something
social
here.
media.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm like, he helped me out, right? We got amazing results. Am I right or wrong?
We did. I'm almost up to 10,000 followers, dude.
Well, I'm talking about results as far as
From the training.
from the training.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I came in out of shape, right? He gets his hands on me. He designs his plan. We go through this plan, and immediately we start seeing the results of competition.
thank you.
So in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, like, how do people not know about this guy, right?
Yeah.
Then he's like, I don't want to jump on social media. I'm like, Coach, you have to jump on social media, right? So
he came in to the very next session. He had names and logos. I had no choice. Like, we didn't even train. He's like, which name do you want? Which logo do you want? And we're creating your account now. I was like, but I'm supposed to be training you. And he's like, no, we're doing this now. And you thought I was crazy with the camera. That's how I learned to do those things. He came in with the camera, with the army crawl and all that stuff. You told me
I
all that
started
stuff.
recording my little workouts and then post them and tagging him, right? So this way, and if someone sees me, they'll see him. you know?
Yeah, and now you're on a podcast, Harry.
And now we're on the podcast. I mean, our
Amazing.
cameras,
Full circle.
microphones, lights, and
man.
we're episode 15, and this is crazy. I can't even believe it.
Thanks for sharing that with me, man. I'm happy that
I
in
know.
some way, shape, or form, I was able to help and influence you or anybody else.
Well, the one thing you always said to me too is that you've tried to do this with other people, but they would never do the work.
yeah.
And every time I'd see you, I would tell you I did this, and I was afraid that I
facts.
was annoying you because and you kept saying like, no, I'm going to keep teaching you because you're actually applying what you're doing, what I'm asking you to do. No, this was a long time coming. I'm glad we had a chance to get together and meet. I'm glad we were able to do it on this podcast. And so with that being said, we want to thank our sponsor again, the Academy Sports Performance in Garwood. And that is a wrap on episode 15 of Destination Talk. Until we see you again, have a great day.